A History of Yesterday, from a diary entry from Leo Tolstoy, Part 1, from his earliest writings. I am writing a history of yesterday, not because yesterday was extraordinary in any way, for it might rather be called ordinary, but because I have long wished to trace the intimate side of life through an entire day. Only God knows how many diverse and diverting impressions, together with the thoughts awakened by them, occur in a single day. Obscure and confused they may be, but they are nevertheless comprehensible to our minds. If it were possible for me to recount them all so that I myself could read the tale with ease, and so that others might read it as I do, a most instructive and amusing book would result. Nor would there be ink enough in the world to write it, or typesetters to put it in print. But to get on with the story. I arose late yesterday at 9:45 because I had retired after 12. I have long since made a rule never to retire after 12, yet this happens to me at least 3 times a week. But there are circumstances in which I consider this rather a fault than a crime. These circumstances are of various kinds. Yesterday they were as follows. Here I must apologize for going back to the day before yesterday. But then, novelists write whole stories about their heroes' forebears. I was playing cards, not at all from a passion for the game, as it might seem, no more indeed from a passion for the game than one who dances the poker does so from a passion for promenading. Rousseau, among other things which he proposed, and no one has accepted, suggested the playing of cup and ball in society in order to keep the hands occupied. But that is scarcely enough. In society, the head too should be occupied, or at the very least should be so employed as to allow silence equally with conversation. Such an employment has been invented, cards. People of the older generation complain that nowadays there is no conversation. I do not know how people were in the old days. It seems to me that people have always been the same, but conversation there can never be. As an employment, conversation is the stupidest of inventions. It is not from a deficiency of intelligence, but from egotism that conversation fails. Everyone wishes to talk about himself or about that which interests him. However, if one speaks and another listens, the result is not a conversation, but a lecture. And if 2 people come together who are interested in the same thing, then a third person is enough to spoil the whole business. He interferes. You must try to give him a share too, and your conversation has gone to the devil. There are also conversations between people who are interested in the same thing, and where no one disturbs them, but such cases are even worse. Each speaks of the same thing from his own viewpoint, transposing everything to his own key and measuring everything with his own yardstick. The longer the conversation continues, the farther apart they draw, until at last each one sees that he is no longer conversing, but is preaching with a freedom which he permits only to himself, that he is making a spectacle of himself, and that the other is not listening to him, but is doing the same thing. Have you ever rolled eggs during Holy Week? You start off 2 identical eggs with the same stick, but with their little ends on opposite sides. At first they roll in the same direction, but then each one begins to roll away in the direction of its little end. In conversation, as in egg rolling, there are little sloops that roll along noisily and not very far. There are sharp-ended ones that wander off heaven knows where. But, with the exception of the little sloops, there are no 2 eggs that would roll in the same direction. Each has its little end. I am not speaking now of those conversations which are carried on simply because it would be improper not to say something, just as it would be improper to appear without a necktie. One person thinks, "You know quite well that I have no real interest in what I am saying, but it is necessary." And the other, talk away, poor soul. I know it is necessary." This is not conversation, but the same thing as a swallowtail coat, a calling card and gloves, a matter of decorum, and that is why I say that cards are an excellent invention. In the course of the game, one may chat, gratify one's ego, and make witty remarks. Furthermore, one is not obliged to keep to the same subject, as one is in that society where there is only conversation. One must reserve the last intellectual cartridge for the final round, when one is taking his leave. Then is the time to explode your whole supply, like a racehorse approaching the finish line. Otherwise, one appears pale and insipid. And I have noticed that people who are not only clever, but capable of sparkling in society have lost out in the end because they lacked this sense of timing. If you have spoken heatedly, and then, because of weariness and boredom, you cannot muster a reply, the last impression lingers and people say, "How dull he is." But when people play cards, this does not happen. One may remain silent without incurring censure. Besides, women, young ones, play cards, and what could be better than to sit beside a young lady for 2 or 3 hours? And if it is the young lady, nothing more can be desired. And so I played cards. We took seats on the right, on the left, opposite, and everything was cosy. This diversion continued until 11:45. We finished 3 rubbers. Why does this woman love? How I should like to finish this sentence here with me, to embarrass me. For even if she didn't, I would not be myself in her presence. It seems to me either that my hands are very dirty, or that I am sitting awkwardly, or else a pimple on my cheek, the one facing her, torments me. Yet she is in no way to blame for this. I am always ill at ease with people whom I either do not like or like very much. Why is this? Because I wish to convey to the former that I do not like them, and to the latter that I do, and to convey what you wish is very difficult. With me, it always works out in reverse. I wish to be cool, but then this coolness seems overdone, and I become too affable. With people whom you love honorably, the thought that they may think you love them dishonorably unnerves you, and you become short and brusque. She is the woman for me because she has all those endearing qualities which compel one to love them, or rather, to love her, for I do love her, but not in order to possess her. That thought never entered my head. She has the bad habit of billing and cooing with her husband in front of others, but this does not bother me. It would mean no more to me if she should kiss the stove or the table. She plays with her husband as a swallow plays with a blossom, because she is warm-hearted, and this makes her happy. She is a coquette. No, not a coquette, but she loves to please, even to turn heads. I won't say coquette, because either the word or the idea associated with it is bad. To call showing the naked body and deceiving in love coquetry. That is not coquetry, but brazen impudence and baseness. But to wish to please and to turn heads is fine and does no one any harm, since there are no Werthers, and it provides innocent pleasure for oneself and others. Thus, for example, I am quite content that she should please me. I desire nothing more. Furthermore, there is clever coquetry and stupid coquetry. Clever coquetry is inconspicuous, and you do not catch the culprit in the act. Stupid coquetry, on the contrary, hides nothing. It speaks thus: I am not so good-looking, but what legs I have. Look, do you see? What do you say? Nice? Perhaps your legs are nice, but I did not notice because you showed them. Clever coquetry says, it is all the same to me whether you look or not. I was hot, so I took off my hat. I saw everything. And what does it matter to me? Her coquetry is both innocent and clever. I looked at my watch and got up. It is astonishing. Except when I'm speaking to her, I never see her looking at me, and yet she sees all my movements. Oh, what a pink watch he has. I am very much offended when people find my Breguet watch pink. It would be equally offensive if they told me that my vest is pink. I suppose I was visibly embarrassed, because when I said that on the contrary it was an excellent watch, she became embarrassed in her turn. I dare say she was sorry that she had said something which put me in an awkward position. We both sensed the humour of the situation and smiled. Being embarrassed together and smiling together was very pleasant to me. A silly thing, to be sure, but together. I love these secret, inexplicable relationships expressed by an imperceptible smile or by the eyes. It is not that one person understands the other, but that each understands that the other understands that he understands him, etc. Whether she wished to end this conversation, which I found so sweet, or to see how I would refuse, or if I would refuse, or whether she simply wished to continue playing. She looked at the figures which were written on the table, drew the chalk over the table, making a figure that could be classified neither as mathematical nor pictorial, looked at her husband, then between him and me, and said, "Let's play 3 more rubbers." I was so absorbed in the contemplation not of her movements alone, but of everything that is called charm, which it is impossible to describe, that my imagination was very far away, and I did not have time to clothe my words in a felicitous form. I simply said, "No, I can't." Before I had finished saying this, I began to regret it. That is, not all of me, but one part of me. There is no action which is not condemned by some part of the mind. On the other hand, there is a part that speaks in behalf of any action. What is so bad about going to bed after 12? And when do you suppose you will spend another such delightful evening? I dare say this part spoke very eloquently and persuasively, although I cannot convey what it said, for I became alarmed and began to cast about for arguments. In the first place, I said to myself, there is no great pleasure in it. You do not like her at all, and you're in an awkward position. Besides, you've already said that you can't stay, and you would fall in her estimation. Comme il est aimable, ce jeune homme. This sentence, which followed immediately after mine, interrupted my reflections. I began to make excuses, to say I couldn't stay, but since one does not have to think to make excuses, I continued reasoning with myself. How I love to have her speak of me in the third person. In German, this is rude, but I would love it even in German. Why doesn't she find a decent name for me? It is clearly awkward for her to call me either by my given name or by my surname and title. Can this be because I— "Stay for supper," said her husband. As I was busy with my reflections on the formula of the third person, I did not notice that my body, while very properly making its excuses that it could not stay, was putting down its hat again and sitting down quite coolly in an easy chair. It was clear that my mind was taking no part in this absurdity. I became highly vexed and was about to begin roundly reproaching myself when a pleasant circumstance diverted me. She very carefully drew something which I could not see, lifted the chalk a little higher than was necessary, and placed it on the table. Then she put her hands on the divan on which she was sitting, and wiggling from side to side, pushed herself to the back of it and raised her head. Her little head, with the fine rounded contours of her face, the dark, half-closed but energetic eyes, the narrow, sharp little nose, and the mouth that was one with the eyes and always expressed something new. At this moment, who could say what it expressed? There was pensiveness and mockery and pain, and a desire to keep from laughing, dignity and capriciousness, and intelligence and stupidity and passion and apathy and much more. After waiting for a moment, her husband went out, I suppose to order the supper. To be left alone with her is always frightening and oppressive to me. As I follow with my eyes whoever is leaving, it is as painful to me as the fifth figure of the quadrille. I see my partner going over to the other side, and I must remain alone. I am sure it was not so painful for Napoleon to see the Saxons crossing over to the enemy at Waterloo as it was for me in my early youth to watch this cruel manoeuvre. The stratagem that I employ in the quadrille I employed also in this case. I acted as though I did not notice that I was alone. And now, even the conversation which had begun before his exit came to an end. I repeated the last words that I had said, adding only, "And that's how it is." She repeated hers, adding, "Yes." But at the same time, another, inaudible conversation began. She, "I know why you repeat what you have already said. It is awkward for you to be alone, and you see that it is awkward for me. So in order to seem occupied, you begin to talk. I thank you very much for this attention, but perhaps one could say something a little bit more intelligent." That is true. Your observation is correct, but I don't know why you feel awkward. Is it possible that you think that when you are alone, I will begin to say things that will be distasteful to you? To prove that I am ready to sacrifice my own pleasures for your sake, however agreeable our present conversation is to me, I am going to speak aloud. Or else, You begin. She. Well, go on. I was just opening my mouth to say something that would allow me to think of one thing while saying something else, when she began a conversation aloud, which apparently could continue for a long while. In such a situation, the most interesting questions are neglected because the conversation continues. Having each said a sentence, we fell silent, tried once more to speak, and again fell silent. The conversation. I. No, it is impossible to talk. Since I see that this is awkward for you, it would be better if your husband were to return. She. Aloud. Well, where is Ivan Ivanovitch? Ask him to come in here. If anyone does not believe that there are such secret conversations, that should convince him. I am very glad that we are now alone, I continued, speaking silently. I have already mentioned to you that you often offend me by your lack of confidence. If my foot accidentally touches yours, you immediately hasten to apologize and do not give me time to do so, while I, having realized that it was actually your foot, was just about to apologize myself. I cannot keep up with you, and you think me indelicate. Her husband came in. We sat for a while, had supper, and chatted. At about 12:30 I went home.